time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, on all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed, and when you go to sleep at night.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of A Time to Please Allah, live on Huda TV from Dubai, 8 p.m. UAE Standard Time and 7 p.m. KSA time. And it's always a time to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah, and we wish you a great night, and we hope that you had a great and productive week. If you missed some of our previous shows, inshallah, you can check back and go to our YouTube page and see the recordings, catch up with what you have missed, and please do visit our Facebook page, A Time to Please Allah, like it, share it, and benefit, inshallah, and share with others so they can benefit as well. Alhamdulillah, we try to always bring you a topic that is of interest to you, something that is you can relate to, something that is of interest to the society at large, the Muslim Ummah at large, be it in the West, be it in the East, wherever you might be today, inshallah. And we always try to build on your feedback, so we do appreciate your emails and your comments, and we hope that they keep coming through, and do suggest any topics that you want us to cover in future shows, inshallah. Today, specifically, we want to touch upon something that we have not really touched upon before in detail, and that is the concept of education in Islam, tarbiyah in Islam. And inshallah, today joining me live from the studio, my dear brother and my dear teacher, Mr. Muhammad Nubi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Thank you, Brother Gabriel, for inviting me to this show, this program. And as you said, the topic of education in Islam is critical, of course, because it's a must that we focus upon this, because our ummah, the future of our ummah, is depending upon how we educate not only ourselves, but most importantly, how we educate our youth, and our families, and and the community at large.
MashaAllah. Let us go back in time and start from where the education of our ummah really started, and that is the Prophet ﷺ. And we know something very beautiful, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, Surah Najm, that Allah says that he was taught by one strong in power, Jibreel, who's obviously taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, so the Prophet ﷺ, he himself was educated, a divine education, if you want to call it, that comes directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through angel Jibreel alayhi salam and to the Prophet ﷺ. And if you want to just give us a little background, what was the prophetic education like? As we know, subhanAllah, it started with Iqra, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. And there's so many things here, and the first thing is Iqra, which is read,
yes,
right, which shows the importance of. If you want to just comment on this, just this one simple word, Iqra. Where do we start from, Ari?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is very, it's obviously prophetic, of course, but obviously and at the same time it's very profound.
Yes.
Of course, that which is prophetic is in fact profound, without a doubt. And we do need to study that, and we do need to reflect upon that and ponder, what does that mean? How did that impact? How did it impact the early Muslims? Of course, because this is where we have to look back to how they were impacted by that, how they understood it, and what they understood that really to mean, and then what did they do with it after that? So we have some steps that I think we always have to look at in terms of education. So in terms of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the early Muslims, as you said, the Prophet ﷺ was taught by Jibreel alayhi salam. He was taught by Jibreel. And then the Prophet ﷺ, embraced that, of course, and he accepted that, And he took that message that was brought to him by Jibril alayhi salam and taught it to his companions and to his followers. And he taught them the meanings of it and how to apply it. And this is what I think we're missing a lot now is that application.
Right.
And it wasn't just a matter of learning the ayah, the ayat of Allah, and just then regurgitating it or repeating it. It was really it was a process of digesting, if you will, and understanding, what those words really meant, and actually pondering upon them or reflecting upon them. Because there are so many verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to reflect and to ponder upon the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the reflection upon ourselves. So in terms of reading, in terms of this word iqra, to read as we normally have translated it to mean, it means that we should take it to mean, or I'm sure it has many meanings, or we can derive many understandings from it. But I think for our sake, we should think, and we should take that to mean is that we have to study.
Right.
Because when you're reading, you're studying. And what are you studying?
Yes.
You're studying the universe. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, is look at the creation. So you're studying the universe. You're pondering and reflecting upon how the plants grow, the sky, the sun, and the moon, and all of these things, and how they are related to one another, and some of the outcomes, of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has done. So this aspect of reading and of studying, and then of applying the knowledge, that we have gained. And this is what the companions did, of course.
Right.
It is said that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ never read more, generally, than 10 or so ayat.
And then apply them.
And then they would study it, and then they would apply it. What does these ayat mean? What do they mean for me in my life? What do I understand from that? What are the lessons in these verses? And then to go ahead on and to apply it. But also we get from this is that the Prophet ﷺ was a teacher. He was their teacher. Yes. And the Sahaba were his students.
Yes.
And so there was the teacher-student relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is something very important, that we have to understand that in order to learn, that the learning process takes place when there is a teacher and then where there are students. The teacher of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Jibril.
No.
And the teacher of the Sahaba was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so on and so on and so forth until now. So this is beautiful when we understand it that way, and then we begin to have the appreciation for that relationship between teacher.
And that's beautiful that you mentioned this. I mean, when we look at the isnad of this knowledge, even the isnad of hadith, it's actually, that's exactly what it is. It's the teacher-student relationship.
Yeah.
And then the student becomes the teacher, and he has students, and that's where the how Islamic knowledge was passed on.
Yes.
And not just knowledge as as information, but knowledge as a comprehensive meaning in terms of practice. That's what we find, going down the line. We would say, well, the closest it was to revelation, that the stronger the message was. And we find the Sahaba radiallahu anhum being the best representation of that. They were the best students.
Yes.
But then when we look down the line of some of the tabi'een or tabi'een, such as Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, who were superstars of knowledge, scholars, oceans of knowledge. But when we look at their lives as well, their application, and they're part of that silsila, that chain, there, as you said, the application was there, their truthfulness, these things that they would extract from the theory and apply it was very much present there.
Yes.
And as you said, this was based on that student-teacher relationship, the teachers of Imam Bukhari, the teachers of the teachers of Imam Bukhari, who slowly go on to the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Sahaba, and then to the Prophet ﷺ, So as you mentioned, that the teacher-student bond was carried on, and that's how we've received Islam, solid proof, till today.
Yes.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah. And another aspect of this as well is, now, what is the purpose of this education?
Right.
What is the purpose of it? What is the purpose of the learning? Because the Sahaba and those who came after them, which is those early generations, they weren't learning just for the sake of learning. It wasn't an intellectual pursuit for them. It was the pursuit of knowledge for the sake of first of all, for pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And that is something very, very important, because after the word iqra comes Bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So the niyyah is exposed. So read or study, but why? In the name of your Lord. Okay, Allah.
Yes, of your Lord.
Allah
yes.
Akbar.
Yeah. So this is very, very important, you see, because a lot of times you have people who are so-called intellectuals.
Right.
But they're intellectuals for the sake of the intellect.
And the intellect.
And they worship their intellect.
And you have Islamic scholars who are not Muslim.
Yes.
And they're intellectuals.
Exactly.
But they're
but what is the niyyah?
The
niyyah is not to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The niyyah is not for the ultimate goal of Jannah. The niyyah is not to apply the knowledge for the betterment of mankind. So for the Muslim, he's learning that knowledge, one, because it is an obligation upon us, first of all, to learn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says ikra, to learn, read, learn, you know. So it is our responsibility to learn, to learn the knowledge, to understand the knowledge, and to apply the knowledge, again, for the sake of Allah, for the pleasure of Allah, and also for the betterment of humankind.
Yes.
You know, I mean, this is really it. I mean, for what other purpose is the knowledge? You know, I mean, what better purpose is the knowledge? Some people use knowledge for different reasons, you know, just to be boastful and to be proud, or for some financial or for some monetary gain. But for the early Muslims and for the Muslim in general, who understands, he knows that that first of all, that the knowledge is from Allah. Yes. All beneficial knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what the mu'min believes, the believer believes. Yes. You see? So he knows that the benefit, that this is from Allah. So knowing and understanding that it's from Allah, then he or she wants to do with that knowledge that which Allah will be pleased with. And by gaining the pleasure of Allah, then we hope for Allah's mercy and His rahmah, that He will then grant us His favor in this world and in the hereafter.
Right.
You know, so because ultimately we want to do whatever we do, it's a part, if we do it with the right niyyah,
yes,
then it's a part of our ibadah. It's a part of it. It becomes ibadah because we're doing it for the pleasure of Allah. We're doing it because it's an obligation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put upon us. We've been put in this world. Our purpose, as clearly as every Muslim knows the ayah, that we've been created. You know, the purpose for which we've been created is to worship Allah.
To worship Allah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He's not created men nor jinn except for His worship. How is that worship? You know, how is it demonstrated? You know, how is this worship demonstrated? It's demonstrated in a variety of ways.
Yes.
And one of them is in learning and in teaching, you know, and in applying the knowledge.
And that application, as you said, very importantly, is that it serves humanity. It tries to educate humanity at large. And that's what, in the sense of the word da'wah,
yes,
the invitation of Islam is for people, as one of these Sahaba, that went to Persia, and he was asked by the emperor as to, why are you guys coming? Do you want some money? We will, enrich you.
Yes.
You're coming. Why? And he said a very profound statement. That he said, we are coming to bring you out of the darkness, into the light.
Yes.
Out of worshiping the created to the Creator, out of the constrictedness of this dunya to the vastness of the akhirah. And this is what da'wah really is. This is what Islam, the purpose of Islam is. It's not to restrict humanity, it's not to oppress them, but it's to really liberate humanity from the shackles, the enslavement of this dunya. A lot of people might be intellectuals. They might, as you said, go on an intellectual journey for the sake of intellect.
Yes.
But in the same time, they enslave themselves to materialism, to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they become, they are not free anymore.
Yeah.
And the purpose of Islam is for that, for humanity to really be at a state where they're free and they can realize the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obviously accept.
Yeah, because think about this. The real true knowledge, the knowledge that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the person uses his intellect properly.
Yes.
When he uses his intellect properly, it leads him to Allah.
It leads, no doubt.
So this was, we were having a conversation with some people online, not recently, on a webinar, and we were talking about this idea of the intellect, And one of the points that we were making is that the truly intelligent person, the true intelligent person allows his intellect to take him, if he's using it properly, it takes him to the oneness of Allah. Because when he studies, when he learns and he understands and she understands that, subhanAllah, this could not have happened were it not for the will of Allah. We have many scientists and et cetera, they're studying, they're traveling. Look, think about this. We have now many nations, and they are scrambling to who can reach the moon and the furthest reaches of the Mars and the Pluto. Okay, this is fine. You reached it. Now what? So what did it tell you? What did you learn from that?
Right.
What did you gain from that? What insight did you gain from that? Did it make you think that then I must be God?
Right.
Because I'm able to do this? Or did you come to the conclusion, the accurate conclusion, the real conclusion, that only Allah, only a creator, an infinite being, could have made all of this possible?
Allah.
And when they find out that there are new galaxies that they hadn't discovered before, more and more, exactly right.
And they're just back to a starting point.
Exactly right.
Like,
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trying to test it. Look, I create as I will.
Yes.
Things that you don't even know about. But this is for mankind to come to that realization. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to get to know Him.
Yes.
Wants us to be aware of Him. And through this knowledge, then we become aware of Him. And it's a level really of understanding, and I think of purpose and thinking that not many people give time to.
Right.
To thought about knowledge and where this knowledge should lead us. On a practical plane, as we've alluded to before here tonight, is that for sure as Muslims, the knowledge that we gain, and we should be trying to gain as much as we can for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to apply it in our own lives, to apply it in our families, and apply it in our societies, in our organizations, again for the betterment of the human being, the betterment of our societies and our communities, so that people can live the kind of life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intended the human being to live. This is the idea. He has created us, and He's put us in, but He's given us a guide.
No.
In the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. And He's given us these tools and these keys.
Right.
So He wants us to use them. And if we use them properly, and if we use them in the right way with the right niyyah, then there's that great reward for us, is the Jannah, inshallah.
Jannah, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
Type, if we move a step ahead,
sure.
Obviously now we talked about the prophetic education. I mean, there's a lot that can be talked about, the tarbiyah that the Prophet ﷺ gave the Sahaba. When it comes to the generations that came after, right? Obviously, we as human beings always compare ourselves to someone. There's always some kind of comparison, and it allows us to compete with each other, right? You always have competition.
Yes.
And for the Muslim, right, he's always competing first and foremost with himself, with his brother and sister and so on, to do better. But at the same time, they do compete with the non-Muslims.
Yes.
Right? And not obviously on a spiritual level, alhamdulillah, we want to be always closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing the right things, following the straight path. But on a practical, when it comes to education right now, what we're talking about, at the beginning, the Muslim Ummah really flourished with education.
Yes.
Right. Now, if we are to look at our status now, we do have to admit that we are taking a back seat.
Of course. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. When we look at the era of Al-Andalus, right, Spain, Baghdad, the city of knowledge, and we compare that time with Europe, for example, right, which was in the Dark Ages. In the Islamic world, ideas, knowledge was flourishing, while the West was still in some kind of darkness.
Yes.
The problem is, as Muslims today, we look at our past and we still point towards our past, but if we look at the present, we are behind. Why? Why did that? Why were we at the top at one time and why are we not now to identify? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really big subject and a really.
It is a big
topic.
subject, but a lot of people avoid it, you know.
Yeah. But this is a part of the reality.
It's part of the reality.
This is a part of the reality. You know, we in kind of common terms, we lost that edge.
Yeah.
And actually, we lost that nia. You know, and
right.
it seems that that we lost that nia to learn for the pleasure of Allah, as we talked about, to use the knowledge that that is in Islam to advance the societies, and then becoming consumed again, unfortunately, by the material world.
Right.
And allowing other ideas and ideologies, to influence the Islamic way, which is very, very dangerous, of course, and particularly when we allowed ourselves, in terms of the ummah, to drop the mantle, if you will,
and we did,
of
yes.
being the forebearers, of civilization. And this is something that the early Muslims actually were afraid of, by the way.
We're very afraid, yes.
And they were very afraid of this. I mean, in terms of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and some of the others after them, they were very, very conscious of this, that the Muslims they feared that the Muslims would become, that this progress would actually be, yes,
damaging.
that would be, because first of all, as Muslims, we believe in the shaitan.
Right.
And the shaitan is the enemy of the mankind, and,
right.
and he will deceive us, and this is what they were afraid of. And many statements from some of the early Sahaba, and particularly some of the Caliphs, were warning the people about these kinds of things. Even
right.
in the time of Medina, by the way.
Right.
I forget which Sahaba it was which Sahabi, he would go into the Medina and warn the people, about becoming consumed by capitalism, if you will, by the dunya. Yeah, exactly. So because they had this, because they understood
the fitna of this progress.
Yes, because of all of the progress that was made, and it was a huge amount of progress, and the Muslims, and there was wealth.
And
wealth
they were absorbing it.
And they were absorbing that, and these are the kinds of things. As a matter of fact, talking about Umar, I recall, I think, reading some of the history, and one of the, in part of the expansion, because during the time of Umar, radiallahu anhu, was, of course, I think we could safely say and accurately say that this was during his caliphate. It was the greatest expansion, the real expansion of the Islamic State.
Right.
And there was one incident I remember reading that things weren't going the way it should in some distant land.
Yeah.
And he wrote to him and said, "What's going on? Have you been mesmerized by this dunya?" I'm using my words here, because he was concerned that if we are using the knowledge, purely for the sake of Allah, then success should be a lot faster.
Right.
So I think part of the issue, became when as the Ummah began to, I think there were a combination of things actually, and according to the historians, other ideologies came in.
And this is something that we want to maybe discuss, because you're right, when it comes to ideologies, when the Muslim Ummah expanded, and we have the example of Baghdad,
yes,
we have the example of Andalus, and as you said, one of the issues was them being mesmerized by the dunya, the success, the lavish lifestyle that came out of that success. Maybe that caused them to lose the niyyah of why knowledge would be seek. Because, Baghdad, the universities, the knowledge circles, the amount of ideas that was coming out of there was just amazing. And then Andalus, their universities. But at the same time, other ideologies were influencing the Muslims now. They were a knowledge center, but people from outside would come in, and for example in Baghdad, a lot of philosophers would come in, many different centers of the Islamic Ummah with people, and it's an interesting exercise, because you would have Muslims sitting with Christians, sitting with Jews, debating, discussing. But it seemed like there were no more guidelines, and the ideas creeped in, and they did influence. And one of probably the greatest and most damaging influences that really affected the Ummah was Greek philosophy.
Yes.
How that impacted the Ummah, specifically at the time, of Imam Ghazali, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, people big names who responded to some of these people, and who wrote about some of the ideas that creeped into the Islamic aqidah and the Islamic train of thought that really changed how Muslims looked at education and how, and as you said again, the niyyah.
Yeah.
It became an intellectual endeavor, debates,
and they had a debate,
discussion.
these philosophical
Who can
debates. Yes.
outbeat who? And subhanAllah, I remember the Khalifa would entertain such debates.
Yeah.
It was like a Thursday night thing to do or something like that, where a debate would come from this side, philosopher, excuse me, and then the Muslim, and then there'll be some fiqh issue or some kind of aqidah issue that they would have to go at it, and it's like an entertainment, and so knowledge became a game.
Yes, it became an intellectual exercise.
Intellectual exercise.
Yeah, and for us as Muslims, there's no debate. It's not a philosophical exercise. I mean, in other words, that which Allah SWT has given to us, has told us that is necessary for us, and that which He has revealed in the Quran, and we have from the Sunnah. There's no debate upon that.
And what He abstained from telling us.
Yes.
Which is something very important again.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, because philosophy tends to go into places that no one has ever gone.
Exactly.
Including when it comes to revelation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that as a mercy, He has not talked about certain things, SubhanAllah. But, people started asking and started thinking about philosophizing ideas that don't exist. And Umar Khattab was very strict
on this point.
He would not allow people to delve into things that are not practical, things that are not part of, within reason, within what's happening at a time, philosophical issues, things.
The what if kinds of things.
What if kinds,
exactly. This is all the what if thing. Yeah.
What if this? What
Some
if
people,
that?
he said, no, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
There's no need to talk about that, because you're talking about things that not haven't even occurred, nobody's even thought about.
Right.
And the reality is because they knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed to us everything we want to know, and needed to know.
Right.
The Prophet ﷺ had taught us all that we needed to know for the ultimate goal, and that is Jannah.
SubhanAllah.
Everything that is, so all of these are the philosophical ideas and these debates. So for the Muslim, if I may, if you don't mind, it kind of reminds me of what's happening now a lot in the West with the Muslims, with the interfaith dialogue.
Right. If you want, we're just going to take a little break.
Okay,
Keep
sure.
that thought.
All right,
It's a very good thought. We're
Very
going to come
good.
back, inshallah,
Thank
within
you.
a few minutes. Huda TV, A Time to Be Zalt. We'll talk about that point, inshallah, just in a few minutes.
Is Allah, a chance to gain reward I will spend on you, He says.
TV commercials motivate viewers into immediate action and to sway consumer loyalty from one brand or service to the other. That's why we're here for you, to help you sell your products and services by using creative ideas that bring life into your own TV commercial. Advertise your business and branded products and services on Huda TV. We will offer you fast-paced and energetic 30-second affordable TV spots. Advertise on Huda TV. Acquire fresh customers and stay within your budget. For more info or to receive a quote, please send your inquiries to advert@Huda TV. Huda TV.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قالوا أجئتنا لتأفكنا عن آلهتنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين. له ملك السماوات والأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور.
فلما رأوه عارضا مستقبل أوديتهم قالوا هذا عارض ممطرنا بل هو ما استعجلتم به.
أخا عاد إذ أنذر قومه بالأحقاف وقد خلت النذر من بين يديه ومن خلفه ألا تعبدوا إلا الله إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم.
فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما العباد
بلاغ فهل يهلك إلا القوم الفاسقون.
God's fan, sent from Allah to an angel then to a man. That man was Muhammad, the best of creation.
A time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back at Time to Please Allah, live on Huda TV, and we are talking about education with Mr. Muhammad Nubi. And just before the break, we were talking about how the Muslim Ummah changed. You know, they started with a prophetic educational model.
No.
From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Jibreel alayhi salam to the Prophet sallam, which included tarbiyah, development, a very holistic educational system that transformed theory into practice in order to serve humanity, to better them, to free them from even intellectual enslavements, dunya enslavements, for them to realize their direction and their goal in life, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately. And then we said that changed as time passed and as the Ummah progressed, and that the niyyah was lost, that it became an intellectual endeavor, kind of just for the sake of intellect. And we kind of gave the examples of Baghdad, Al-Andalus, where debates would take place just as something of entertainment, right? And you gave an example just before the break to continue with.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Yeah, I was relating the philosophical debates of that time,
yes,
and bringing it, fast forwarding it to some of the interfaith dialogues that now we see going on between many Muslims and Christian and non-Muslim organizations, particularly in the West. So, but before I get to that point, let me make an issue here, or bring a point here about philosophical debates, and compare it with what is happening now to what was then, all right, in terms of the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions and the early Muslims. You see, what philosophy does and philosophical debates do is they whittle away and they destroy yaqeen.
Yes, indeed.
See, the early Muslims had yaqeen.
Yes.
They had complete certainty.
Yes.
And faith in the divineness, in the divinity of the Book of Allah and in the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. There were no doubt in their mind about that whatsoever.
Yes.
But the minute that you start allowing these philosophical debates to come in, or any type of philosophical discourse, in other words, knowledge that has no benefit, no real benefit, no real benefit in terms of this life, and certainly not the akhirah, then once you do that, then that begins to whittle away at the yaqeen, at the certainty that the Muslim, that the mu'min is to have about his Lord, and about his book, and his messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you fast forward now to today, we see these same kinds of things that you described, like what was happening in Baghdad when you had all of the philosophical debates. We see that. I see some similarities, if you will, with what is happening in many places, particularly in the West, in terms of the interfaith dialogues. The Muslims, many of the Muslims, unfortunately, are feeling, how can I put it, are feeling a little defeated, if you will,
right?
Kind of, on their heels. So therefore, to be able to get along, or to be able to have some coexistence, they will have then, instead of the real dawah, the actual dawah, the proclaiming of Islam as in fact the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intended for human beings to follow, then it becomes now, well, we won't have that, but we will have this discourse. We will have this philosophical discourse. Now, it's not called that. It's called interfaith dialogue.
Right.
And I think most of the scholars, the credible scholars, said that this is not something that the Muslim has to be very, very careful. Is this really dawah? And I think this is the question that we're at. Is this really dawah? Because if I'm sitting with you or with some non-Muslim person, and I'm just sharing. Okay, we're just a sharing of ideas.
Okay.
But not that the sharing of ideas or the sharing of the aspects of one religion is necessarily in and of itself a bad thing.
Right.
But what do I mean by that? What am I thinking about that? Am I thinking then as a Muslim that I believe that there might be a possibility that your idea about Allah
Could also
and about His creation could be correct?
Right.
You understand? And this is the problem.
Right.
So it all depends upon the approach.
Right.
So the approach of the Muslims, yes, the Prophet ﷺ entertained Christians.
Yes.
He entertained Christians, but it wasn't a philosophical discussion.
No.
It wasn't an interfaith dialogue,
Right.
as you will. No, he was inviting them to worship Allah
Worship
alone.
Allah alone, yeah.
He was inviting them to worship Allah alone, and showing them the superiority of Islam,
Yeah.
and to showing them that what Allah has intended for the human being is to worship Allah, and as you indicated very correctly before, not to worship the creation.
No.
And worship the creation in all its form, whether it's the intellect, or whether it's a tree or stone, or whether it's money, whatever it is that people have actually given themselves over to. You see? So this is a real problem and a real issue. So we have to understand what is taking place. And I think this is why discussions like this are very, very important. Because if we don't understand that we're maybe repeating some errors in terms of the tarbiyah process, the
Right.
education process,
Right.
then we won't really find ourselves as an ummah truly moving forward. And this is the issue. So I say to my brothers and my sisters in Islam is that, particularly those in the West and who are living among the non-Muslim and other religious communities, is to be very careful that we don't relegate Islam to intellectual discourse.
Right.
That we don't relegate Islam. Yes, we have to we're in a situation, in many parts of the world where we are involved with other people, and where
Right.
we're existing with
Yeah,
other
of course.
people. And this is good. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
This is nothing new in Islam.
Right.
This happened, in their early during the Islamic state and Islamic period.
Right.
But how do we now relate to them in terms of about Islam?
Right.
That becomes really the question.
Right.
So yes, and when you started talking about this, the philosophical discourse and dialogue that was going on, it really brought to mind, because for us as Muslims, being from the West myself, and when we see these kinds of things happening, it makes many of us as Muslims who are trying to maintain this yaqeen, who are trying to maintain this certainty and to follow the prophetic tradition of education, is that let's be careful that we don't fall into, again, and make Islam an intellectual discourse and not actually dawah or education, to truly education of really what Islam means. And I'm going to give you one quick example, and I will acknowledge that it's a pet peeve of mine. It is just something that annoys me a little bit. And so this is only personal, okay? But mostly what I find happening a lot of times, particularly in these kinds of situations, is when people are asked what is Islam, is that our first response is peace. Islam means peace. Islam means peace.
Yeah.
So when I was back home in the U.S. For the winter break, and I was invited to give a khutbah. All right. So alhamdulillah. So I accepted the invitation to the Jummah khutbah. And of course, and this, a lot of things with Donald Trump and all these other things, Islamophobia as we call it, is going on. And so I really said to the people, please, let's don't let the first word out of our mouth when we want to describe Islam as peace. Peace is an outcome.
Yes.
Peace is an outcome of the submission to the will of Allah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes.
Once we submit to the will of Allah, once there's submission,
there.
then there is peace. But in and of itself, there is no peace.
Right.
There's no peace without justice.
Right.
There's no peace without the eradication of oppression.
Yes.
There's no peace without, getting rid of or diminishing or eliminating as much as possible all of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with.
Injustices, yes.
And once we can do that, then we truly have peace. Now that's education.
Right.
Now you're really educating the people, and that's what the early Muslims did.
Yeah.
That's what they would do, because they wanted the life of the people to be under the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what they want, and then they knew that there would be peace. They knew that the peace would come, as a result of that. So, so this process of education, we have to look back understand how the Muslims understood it and what the approach was. And again, as we said, what was the need for it. But unfortunately, as you said, and as we were discussing, the Ummah allowed, at points to, these other ideologies to influence, and so therefore now there's this mixture, of Islam and Greek philosophy and all of these other philosophies and ideas, unfortunately, that sometimes that creeps in, that I think that's still holding us back some. But the fact that we're talking about it today, alhamdulillah, and I'm sure we're not the only ones, I think is a good sign that we realize that we have to start making some type of, as we call it, paradigm shift, if you will, in terms of how we approach it. And if I may go on a little further, if you don't mind, it's interesting in terms of the West, and what I saw before, after I became Muslim a number of years ago, about 30 years or so ago, is that what I realized, that the West took the Islamic principles.
Yeah, that's something.
They took the Islamic principles, but they used it because they wanted to become powerful for the sake of being powerful, powerful economically, powerful militarily, and all the other ways, and ideologically. They wanted to become powerful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as Allah says, in the ayah, and we're making this dua, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana, said there are some who they just want to ask Allah for the good of this life.
Yeah.
But the believer, he also wants the life, not the good of this, but the life of the hereafter as well. He asks for both. So what I saw when I became Muslim, because before I became Muslim, I was working with many of the Fortune 500 companies in the U.S., alhamdulillah. And going through many of the training and the lessons and the managerial, processes, that many of these companies take you through. And after I became Muslim and started reading, I said, wow, that was Islam.
That was Islam, yeah. That's what happened to me when I went through Teachers College, actually, some years ago. Some of the theories, the education theories, I said, this was, pioneered by so-and-so. You have Piaget, you have, Vygotsky, you have different, educational theorists, right? And I said, what are you talking about? These people didn't come up with it. This is one of the Prophet ﷺ,
Yes.
And word by word. I mean,
yes.
Yes, I was very shocked, but the question goes back to, though, and you said that the West took these concepts and really worked with them for the sake of power, for the sake of ideology, and so on.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it seems that the Muslims lost them. The owners of these concepts, the owners of these ideas, of these systems, lost them. Because when we look at our ummah today, we don't have them. What caused that stagnation? Where did it happen? And how did we reach this state right now? And why is the West using these theories and applying them and really succeeding at using them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can look at it a couple of different ways. One, in terms of, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gives to whom He pleases, and His giving to whom He pleases is oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, in fact, a test. It is a test. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give, and He'll allow you to use whatever's in His creation, and whatever the knowledge. So you use it. But you're only going to get out of it what your niyyah is in it. So then the niyyah for the people, for those other than the Muslims, the niyyah is for the dunya. They want to get that. But the Muslim is trying to do the same thing, but not without the niyyah. In other words, what I mean is the dunya, many of the Muslims, unfortunately, are trying to get the dunya and trying to amass, and create these, big societies, if you will, or compete in that regard, without the idea or the understanding, it appears, that yes, we compete, but we compete for the sake of Allah. We compete for all that which is good, and then that we don't follow that which is against Islamic principles. See, because again, the West, although it is using a lot of principles that we find in Islam, but it's also using a lot of principles that are not part of Islam. Do you understand my point?
Right.
So here's what we've done in some cases. In some cases, we've looked at the West and we say, oh wow, man, look what they've done. So then we're going to grab it, all of it, without taking from it
what's
that
good
which is only which is good, and without realizing that which is good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they say, we're the rightful owners of this.
Right.
that the believer The Muslim is the rightful owner of this knowledge.
Yes.
And so we have to take that back and use it like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to use it.
No.
This is what we have to do. I mean, the formula is not that difficult. It's a fairly simple formula.
No.
But if we don't use it, if we don't use it at all, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, withhold and will not grant us, the benefit and the glory that once was there, because the thinking, the niyyah, is not there for that. So we really have to go back in that regard. Now, when I say go back, not necessarily go back 1,400 years,
Right.
but we have to go back to the right idea, to the right concept, and to the right thinking, and the right processes, so that we can, inshallah, with Allah's help and by His permission, get the results that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends for us to get, and that it is designed for. Because we will get that result if we apply it. If we apply the formula. When you apply a formula, the formula is there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the key. He just wants us to use the key. We just have to use the key. But we have to use His key.
Right.
We can't use somebody else's key.
Right.
Now, somebody else's key may look shiny and it may look similar.
Right.
But it's really not going to. It's really not going to unlock what you want to unlock.
Yes.
What you think you're going to get out of it.
Right.
It's only going to get you. You're going to have a hard time. You're going to struggle, and maybe this is why sometimes we, as a ummah, we're struggling, because we really don't have the right key. If some of the grooves fit, some don't quite fit. So we're moving forward a little bit and we move backwards a little bit. But we have to take all of the Quran, the whole of it, all of the Sunnah, and apply it to the best of our knowledge and to the best of our understanding, because those are the keys. Because the Prophet said, "This is what I've left you.
No.
I've left you these things."
Right.
And to hold on to them and to use those and to implement those. So I think this is something that as Muslims we have to really begin to now rethink, how we are applying, even in terms of just our. We're talking about education, and all of this is in education, but even in our educational systems.
Right.
Even our education systems, and we you and I were talking about this earlier this evening before the program. Even let's say in a school, and we want to start a school, a Muslim school, okay? So maybe we'll look at other, societies that have, good systems. And yes, we'll take the good from anything, but can you take everything and then, put it in another place and say it will work in that place? I don't think you can evaluate it like that.
Right.
And this is where we have to do some really critical thinking, in terms of, who are we getting knowledge from? What knowledge is beneficial? From who and from what sources we'll get that knowledge? What are the circumstances? When what is the time frame in terms of how we want to apply that, and how that knowledge really must be applied?
And looking at our, we're both educators, and looking at our system today, we find that there's no filter really that filters this knowledge out. We as Muslims, 20th century, 21st century, when we look at the history of education within the Muslim countries, we have taken anything.
Yeah, we just take it all.
We took it all. Whatever came in, it must have been good because it was coming from the other side.
Yes.
And we're not in good shape, but they are.
Well, they're in good shape, so they must be doing something right.
Be doing something right. So let's take it, without realizing that that is not this.
Exactly.
And there is not here.
Their goals and objectives are one thing. Yes. Our goals and objectives also have to be something else.
Yes.
So yes, you take, no problem. It's okay, take, but we take only the good of it.
Right.
And I think the word that you use correctly is filter. I mean, in other words, it's like in your house and in the summertime, you just can't fly from the window. I mean, okay, you want some fresh air, but there are flies and mosquitoes.
Yes.
So you have to put up a screen. And you have to filter those things out that are going to be harmful to you. So you have to be wise enough from the beginning to understand this is not our system, but there might be something in those systems that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is beneficial. Again, if it's beneficial, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there may be some other things in there that we don't really need. So we have to really start filtering. And then we have to start doing another thing, and I think that's very, very, very important. We have to start doing our own research, writing our own textbooks, doing all of these things, but doing it from our own perspective.
Yeah.
Yes. from our own perspectives, and only really truly until we really develop that in its fullness, in my opinion, will we really see the Ummah really begin, because now you're going to be going on your own, on our steam and not somebody else's steam.
Yes.
You understand? And you always be looking for someone else's, energy, without using your own energy or the energy that Allah subhanahu has given you. And so, because right now we're not very confident.
We're not.
We don't feel very confident in ourselves to do
right
of our own.
Even though we are capable.
Even though we're capable.
Doing this,
clearly,
yes.
There's no doubt that we're capable.
About it. We have all the resources. We have everything we need. We have the minds. We have the potential. But we're not. As you said, we don't have the confidence.
We just don't have that confidence.
It's a big step, but it's a step that we've taken before.
Yes.
As we said in the past, and we can take it again, but we're not confident enough to take it.
Yes.
And that would really break that barrier. That would really give us that edge to get back on top when we make our own things, when we produce our own education, our own system, not import it from somewhere and says, okay, here it is.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes we try to, as the expression goes, we try to put a around what's the terminology? A round cylinder in a square peg.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't work. Yeah. I mean, it'll fit, but it's not going to fit right.
Right.
It's not going to fit just right. I mean, it's just like wearing a jacket that's really too small, that's too small or too big.
Right.
It's not, you got it on, and it may be new and a little shiny, but it's not going to really wear properly.
Right.
It's not going to really feel very well, So this is another aspect, I think, of the educational process that as Muslims we have to really begin to look at. Really starting, our own research institutions, our own publishing companies, doing it all for ourselves. There are some attempts, alhamdulillah, now.
Yes.
There are some attempts now to do that, which is very, very good. One of my passions, of course, is in management, it's specifically Islamic management. And and when I started studying this whole the idea of Islamic management, I could hardly find any works and materials on Islamic management. There are a few. There's some articles have been written and some small booklets, but not really the libraries. In other words, you go to any U.S. university,
right,
and any business school, and there's a library, the business school library,
right,
books and books and books and books and books and books on management principles.
Right.
Where are management books and principles? And they are there. I mean, the principles are there. The principles in Islam.
Of course, yeah.
The principles are in Islam. The principles are in the Sunnah, the Messenger of Islam. So, and again, until we start doing that, until we start doing our own research, we start, reading the Quran and reflecting upon it and said, okay, how can we use these verses? What can I understand from this?
Right.
And how can we apply this today? Today. And when we start doing that, inshallah, then I think we'll start, making the real progress that we're looking for, inshallah.
I really think we're going to have to take this to a second episode, inshallah, as the time has flew by, subhanAllah. So, inshallah, I think we'll leave it to a second episode, inshallah, for the following week or the week after, inshallah. It's a vast topic. There's a lot of things to be discussed, but it's very important to be discussed. This needs to be addressed. And for our viewers to ponder some of these points, because it's you, the viewers, who might wake up one day and says, well, I have the resources, I have the ability, let me actually do something about it.
Yes.
I like these ideas.
Yes.
These ideas are important. Let me find minded people who have the ability and the resource, intellectuals, and let us actually transform these ideas into action. Let's bring Islamic education, Muslim education back on par with other education systems and compete and even, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, supersede them.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Jazakumullah khair for watching. We will see you again next week, bi'idhnillah, on A Time to Please Allah, live from Huda TV. This is your host, Gabriel Al-Romaani. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, He says, all on who spend call. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn His reward. Don't forget the oppressed, and when you go to sleep,